Welcome to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change, the show that brings real conversations about fairness, compassion, and progress into our everyday lives. I'm Puja Ari, and each week I sit down with guests from all kinds of industries and backgrounds to talk about what equity looks like, not just in their work, but in their daily choices and personal journeys. Because building a more equitable world isn't just for academics, activists, or experts, it's for all of us. Every day, in big ways and small, we can choose to be more aware, more kind, and more connected. And this is where we learn how. Hi, Anjali. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, everybody, to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. Today, our guest is Anjali Jariwala. Anjali is the founder of Fit Advisors, a financial planning firm serving physicians and business owners across the United States. After working with Fortune 500 companies and high net worth clients, she launched her own firm to make a more personal and meaningful impact. Anjali helps clients understand the emotional and psychological side of money, turning financial complexity into confident relationships with money. Her work and insights have been featured in CNBC, Bloomberg, the New York Times, USA Today, Business Insider, US News and World Report, and Investment News. In addition to her financial advisory work, Anjali is the author of Why We Eat with Our Hands, a children's book celebrating everyday South Asian cultural traditions. Inspired by her experience as a South Asian mother seeking more representation in children's literature, she writes to help children see themselves reflected in the stories they read. Through both financial education and storytelling, Anjali is passionate about helping people feel informed, represented, and empowered to build the lives they envision. Welcome, Anjali. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy you said yes to be a guest on our
Of
show.
course. I'm so honored that you invited me.
You have so much to offer, and I really want our audience to understand what you do, where equity plays a role in your life, and why it's important to you. With the introduction I just gave, I want to ask you first, is there anything that you'd like to expand on and talk about more about how I introduced you?
Sure, I'll go into a little bit more detail. So, my background is in tax. I was a CPA. I was working at the Big Four. Like many of us who are in the Big Four, burnout is very real, right? And
Mhm.
so, I was at a point in my life where I wanted to do something different. The experience I got there was amazing, but it's not as meaningful to help Fortune 500 companies that already make hundreds of millions of dollars save even more money on taxes, right? So
Mm.
I wanted to find something that I felt more passionate about. So I sort of stumbled into financial planning, wealth management. My husband, who's a physician, was getting his MBA at the time. We were in Chicago, and one of the classes that he took was taught by a local financial advisor who was also a CPA from the start, career changer, so kind of similar trajectory that I was on. And he came home and he's like, you should do this for a living. And I think there's a preconceived notion about financial planning and wealth management that it's only for people who are ultra wealthy. The
Yeah.
demographic tends to be older, white, male in terms of advisors. And so I also had the same preconceived notion. I'm like, I don't know, like this seems like I don't know if I want to go from Fortune 500 companies to ultra wealthy people. That doesn't feel like a fit for me. And so he's like, why don't you meet with this advisor? So I did. He's like, no, I serve people like me, people who are in retirement. They're not ultra wealthy. They come from a lot of different backgrounds. So I started exploring it and eventually transitioned into financial planning. I think where the equity piece comes in is that for me personally, I've always had what I would say not a great relationship with money, right? I'm a child of immigrants, I'm the oldest daughter. I was taught to save every dollar, work at the same company for whatever number of years, right? Stability. Stability was very
Right.
important and save, save,
Absolutely.
save, right? I think for a lot of us with immigrant parents, they took so much risk coming to this country, so for them, especially for my dad, it was like, don't take any more risk. They put everything on the table. So they want to make sure that their kids are very settled. And the easiest way is to find the paths that aren't as risky. And so when I told them I was leaving my fancy job to transition into a field that they had no idea about. They're like, "Are you sure about this?" And I
Mhm.
said, "I'm going to try. I can always come back and fall back to what I was doing before." And so at that point, also, I was pregnant. I was kind of on this emotional journey. I was in a lot of therapy, and I realized that I had a lot of money trauma. So there
Mhm.
were things that were said to me, taught to me as a child that I carried as an adult that resulted in me having unhealthy relationships with money. So when I started working in financial planning, I was attracting clients similar to me. I was attracting a lot of immigrants, children of immigrants, not immigrants, but people who still had money trauma. And the thing that we connected on was the fact that I could identify that there was something underlying that was taught to them. I think it's very common in communities of color, especially, and that it impedes us in being able to not only make better financial decisions for ourselves, but it also impedes our ability to enjoy the money and prioritize it to what really brings us joy. Right. So I think a lot of this is centered around identifying it, working through it so that you view money as a tool, not view it as something that is emotion driven, is creates the scarcity mindset. Whatever the story it is that you're telling yourself, we need to unwind that so that you can view money as a tool. And once it's a tool, that's all it is. It's just a tool to help you facilitate your dreams and your goals for your life.
Yeah. You said I'm just taking notes. There's so many questions I have. And it's oh gosh, where do I start? My family also came in the mid 70s and like you said, took the biggest gamble of their lives. Of course, they were like in their early 20s. I think
Same with
making
my
a risk
parents.
assess they were more willing to take that risk in their early 20s than probably they would be, let's say, if they came in their 40s. And but nonetheless, they took massive risk. And when I was growing up, I thought, and even I'm in my mid 40s, but like even well into my 20s, I just thought, I'm so grateful that my parents took this massive risk. I can't imagine ever doing that. And now in this situation that we're in, it's starting to dawn on me the type of risk my parents took. Now I'm in a different my brain is developed like I'm in my mid 40s, my parents were in their early 20s. It was a different risk assessment, but now in the current global situation we're in, I never really thought, what if I have to move? What if I have to leave and uproot my family? And it's really put into perspective a little bit more of what my parents went through and the risk that it took for them to come, which was something I totally took for granted as a child and young adult. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to add that. And you were talking about, there's a commonality of our unhealthy relationship with money. So, can you tell me a little bit more about the symptoms of an unhealthy relationship? What, not, I know it won't be totally inclusive of all the symptoms of it, but what do you mean? And can you talk more about that and how it's an unhealthy relationship?
So I'll just talk from my perspective to start, then I can give a few other examples that I've seen. But for me growing up, we were middle class, right? And I was born in Los Angeles, and my parents decided to have us all move when I was 12 years old to Chicago. So I went from a very diverse environment into a neighborhood that was more affluent and predominantly white. So that was the first time I had like the realization that like we're quote unquote poor, even though we're not poor, but to compare to like the peers that I was going to school with, that's how I felt. And that feeling that as a child, for me, what it did was it created a sense of that I didn't have security. So, like, money provided security. And if I didn't have money, I would never be secure, right?
Mhm.
Secure, like emotionally, financially, was all kind of weaved together. And this is me as a 12-year-old who can't process complex things like that. So, once I became an adult, right, and I met my husband at the time, similar background. He actually was raised by a single mom. So similar middle class, but completely different views on money, right? So I'm like, how is it that we both came from similar backgrounds and have such different views on money. He's much more of an abundance mindset. He's the money will always be there. I'm not going to continue to deprive myself. I'm a doctor. I've deprived myself for long enough. I want to spend and enjoy my money. And I was like, no, we can't do that. We must save in all of these buckets. We have to have all this cash sitting there. And it started to create like friction between us. And
Mm.
so I was like, I need to figure out how to work through this, right? So I've been in therapy for a very long time. I love therapy, big proponent of it. So in therapy, I learned that the story I was telling myself was that if you don't have money, you don't have security. And not feeling a sense of security is a very scary place to be in.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of work to unwind that, to be in a position in which I can spend money without feeling guilt. So guilt's the first one. So when clients come to me and they feel guilty about spending money, I know that there's something there that we need to unwind, right? The second one is the exact opposite, that they may have felt so deprived when they were young that they do the opposite and they overspend, right? They're like, I've deprived myself for so long. I'm just going to spend and enjoy my money and worry about the future later. So we have two extremes. Neither one is healthy. So we're trying to get to a middle ground in which we're like, I felt deprived. It's okay to treat myself. I don't want to have the guilt, right? So, how do I get to a place in which I can spend money? Because that's what it comes down to is being able to spend money without the guilt, but also understanding that there are buckets you need to fill to reach financial independence, which is also very important for my client base. So, we want to do both, right? And it's trying to find the balance between spending and saving and then prioritizing the spending to really what's important to you. For most people, when we do really heavy goals discussions to really understand clients' goals and values. At the end of the day, like what people value is time and experiences, right? So if
Mhm.
someone's coming to me and I'm looking at their spending, and we've done goals and time and experience is what they value, but I'm like, why are you buying material things, but you're not traveling when you told me that travel and experiences is so important to you? So what we do is we're backing into these goals and they're not just savings goals, they're spending goals as well. I tell them like, give me your ideal travel budget. Like how much would you want to spend in any given year to do all the trips you want to do and have the experiences you want to have? And for a lot of people, it's scary to vocalize that because it's like, it's too big of a number. I don't have permission to spend. A lot of what I do is giving clients permission. Like, it's okay
Mhm.
to spend. Someone gets a big bonus. The first thing they do, they're like, Anjali, should you invest it? And I was like, no, first thing is, what are we going to carve out for yourself as a treat because you worked really hard? So it's just setting up these
Yeah.
avenues in which they feel like, hey, they have the security, they have someone who's watching their back, looking out for these things. So then it gives them a little bit more freedom that not everything is on their shoulders. They have permission. And now they can really view money as something that is going to bring them joy and align their values to their dollars.
Yeah. I'm wondering because you having a discussion about money with anybody, by yourself, with your partner, in your primary family, whichever the family you grew up with, it is so intricate. There's so many details to it, and there's personality tied to it too. Do clients feel when you kind of it's like a well of questions and things to figure out. Is there how do clients not feel overwhelmed in like jumping into this discussion?
To be honest, like the first meeting I usually have with clients is just data gathering, kind of high level, tell me what's going on. And I always ask at the end of that first meeting, like, how are you feeling? And in every single situation, they're like, I feel a sense of relief. That's the
Mhm.
first thing they say. Because this has been something that's probably been on their mind, on their to do list. And they finally found someone who's going to help them with that. And to kind of tie the equity piece in, there are very few advisors that look like me in this profession. We have a saying in this profession that most advisors are like old and stale because that's true. The average age is late 50s, early 60s. There's very few women, even less people of color. And
Yeah.
money is such an emotional topic. So when I'm talking to a prospective client, I give them all my background. I'm like, I have the technical expertise, et cetera. But I was like, at the end of the day, you have to feel really comfortable with the person because I'm like, it's a very personal and it can be a very emotional relationship. I'm one of the first to find out of cancer diagnosis. I'm the first to find out when someone passes away. So you have to feel comfort in the person that you're working with, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to money. And that's why I feel like this work is so important because there are clients who worked with me who've been looking for someone for a very long time. And they're like, no one really got me. No one understood me. Like, I had a call with you, and we just talked about how I grew up in a Nigerian household and I couldn't spend any money. And now I just want to spend money. And you pinpointed it exactly on the dot on our first call. Right. So there's things that are there that I can connect because I have that shared background, that shared experience. That's so important. It's why I'm such a big advocate for bringing more women and people of color into this profession because the industry cannot produce enough advisors for the demand that's out there. And that discrepancy where people are like, there's more university programs, there's things that are popping up, but there is a wide gap. And the
Mhm.
advisor population is an aging population. So there is a need for more people to come into this profession, especially people who have a background and experience in which they can connect with people. It's so important. And it's really good work that you're really doing with helping people kind of feel that comfort with money, right? Like the goal for Fit Advisors is to facilitate healthy relationships with money. That's what we're doing at the end of the day. We're like behind the scenes. I'm a very technical, detail oriented person, but at the end of the day, if we can achieve that, then that's a successful relationship.
Yeah, I think most people don't see a financial advisor. They feel it is like such a square box that's very rigid and there's only one way to be on it. And I don't fit that profile because I'm not making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So that doesn't even apply to me. And it's only like a certain echelon of people that's so far away from me that doesn't even apply. And I think breaking down that destructive stereotype because money is like the thing that almost all of us feel so vulnerable about, and it's also feels like a mystery.
It is, but it
Like,
doesn't have to be. That's the thing.
like, why does this feel so mysterious? And you listen to the radio, like you listen to public radio, and there's like the morning report on the markets, and you're like, if I can't even understand what the radio is saying, then like how can I can't be fluent in this language, and then talking to
Mhm.
somebody about it is really daunting. But the way you're talking about how you provide relief to your clients just makes it seem like it's not as daunting as it's put out there to be. Can you talk about some of the ways you demystify and take the scary out of talking about money with your clients?
Of course. So I like to lead with education, right? So I tell all clients, like, come to me with every question you have, because the more I can educate you, the more you feel empowered to make these decisions on your own. So I'm just here as the guide, right? That's always the premise. I'm always going to give you my thoughts, my recommendations, but there's usually a few different paths we can take for someone to reach whatever goal we're aiming toward. So if they have that education, which I'm helping them get to that place, they're going to feel much more empowered and they're going to follow through with that. The other component is we take the complexity of money and we just break it down into manageable components, right? That's all it is at the end of the day. Money is complex. I have a lot of clients that have very complex situations, but if we could just break it down into easy, actionable steps and we just take it one step at a time, it sort of just demystifies the whole aspect of money because now it's not I don't understand how all of this works together because we've already put everything together and we have a plan. We have 12 months that we're mapping out. We're meeting every month. And we're just going to work through every component of the plan, right? Have a few clients that this past year, right, we do a year end review. I call them my OG clients because they're kind of like my first original 10. A lot of them are still with me, and I've been in business for this is my 11th year now for Fit Advisors. And I like pulled up their net worth. I was like, oh, I just kind of wanted to share with you. Like, here's kind of where you started and here's where you are now. And I want you to look at that number because when we started working together, you told me you would never reach that number,
Oh,
right? And you
yeah.
reached that number and you got to do all the things you want to do. You got to live a great life and it just happened, right? And it didn't just happen. We put in work. There's guidance,
Obviously.
there's advice, right? But it's
Right.
that what ends up happening is where people currently are and where they wanna be, that gap is a lot smaller than they realize. It's just they don't have a professional who's bringing all of the aspects of their financial life together and creating a comprehensive picture in which they can understand. Once they have that, it's like the light bulb goes off. They're like, "Oh, that's all we need to do," or "That seems difficult but attainable." And then what and their accountability partner. So if they're deviating, I'm like, let's get back on track. It's okay to deviate once in a while. The plan is fluid, but now we got to get back on track. So
Mm,
there's so many components to it. It's education, it's the technical advice, it's all the number crunching, but it's also just having someone accountable, someone you're meeting with. And they know they're like, oh, we got to meet with Anjali. We better get all of our work done.
yeah.
So it
Better do
it's
our homework.
not as difficult as people make it out to be, but it's the difficulty is the fact that we are inundated with so much information now when you're whether you're reading the news, whether you're on social media, and a lot of the information out there is generic, right? So you read
Yeah.
something and you're like, why can't I do that? And I have a client who sends me TikToks and he's like, can I do this? And I was like, no, you can't do this because blah, 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 blah. And he's, oh, okay. Like, why didn't they say it in the TikTok video? And I was like, because it's 30 seconds and they can't go into all the technical knowledge. So it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to navigate this on their own. The other piece of it, because I work with mainly physicians, physicians are one of the few careers in which they go from making very little money to a lot of money in a very short window of time. And their education does not teach any sort of financial literacy. I think that's the biggest drawback that we have in this country is that we set our kids up, our adults up to like get good grades, get into a good school, get a good job. But we're not teaching any sort of financial literacy. And even some basic financial literacy goes such a long way to get people on the right path. And especially in communities of color, if you don't have a role model or someone who is guiding you, it's really easy to fall off that track because you just don't know. And then the more and more time you wait before you get back on track, the harder it is to do, right? But there's just
Mhm.
so many components to it that make it complex. So it's figuring out how you get that knowledge and information to make it work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like what feels impossible to us lay people, you make possible. It's not actually impossible. It's just you can kind of see it, make a plan, and it's achievable once you lay it out and you have all of that expertise to do. What so for those listening and wondering, "Oh, maybe I should reach out to Anjali." Like how can they reach you? How can they know if they're a good fit with you? Tell us like a little bit about the process of.
Sure. So personality is such a big component, right? So I usually first suggest that clients go to my website or prospective people who might be interested, fit advisors. I have a lot of content on my website. So that kind of gives you insight into what I usually work on with clients in my client household, because a lot of my blog posts are kind of things that I'm working on a regular basis. I have a podcast, Money Checkup. I don't actively record, but a lot of that content is still very evergreen. And that has always been like a great avenue for me to get clients, mainly because anyone who listened to my podcast already got a good sense of who I am, how I think, my style and approach. So when they come to me, they're like, I already know I want to work with you. And I was like, okay, should we go through it? And they're like, nope, I listened to your podcast. I'm good. Like, where do I sign up? So I think
Yeah.
starting there is a great point. And then you can always reach out to me on my website. There's a contact form button. And even if you feel like maybe I'm a fit, maybe I'm not a fit, reach out to me because I have a network of really amazing advisors that are my friends. So I always want to try, even if I'm not the right fit, I always try to set people up with other referrals who may be a good fit. Because if someone
Mhm.
is taking the step of trying to find a financial advisor, that's really difficult to do for a lot of people, right? To ask for help for something that in our society is perceived as you should just know how to do this. So that's such a big step. So I don't want to leave someone empty handed. I want to give them other people that they can go to who's going to take care of their needs, work with them in a way in which is going to be comfortable and great for their relationship.
Excellent. So the website is fitadvisors.com. We'll put that also in our show notes and anjalijariwala.com. I want to move to the equity piece and also this amazing book that you wrote, Why We Eat with Our Hands. I got it at Books or Magic, which is my local bookstore. You can go to bookshop.org. It is on Amazon and really any place that you buy your books. Why We Eat with Our Hands. Can you tell us why you wrote the book? What does it mean?
Of course.
And let us know who's the star of the book as well.
Of course. Why We Eat with Our Hands was my COVID project. The main character is my daughter, Nyla. So I started, the book took me 2 years from start to when it was finished. So anyone who is looking to write a children's picture book, you think, oh, it can't be that difficult. It is. It's a lot of work. I had amazing people helping me along the way. So I'm very grateful for that. But it really came from this aspect of I'm very passionate about showing representation in underrepresented professions, right? Financial planning, wealth management is one of them. And then I came to the stark realization that there's even less representation in children's literature. So my daughter was 3 at the time, and I was all about building inclusive bookshelves. And so I started looking for books written by South Asian authors featuring South Asian children. And there's definitely so many more than when I was growing up, which when I was growing up, there was zero. But there's still more books written about animals than children of color in literature.
Absolutely.
So I and at the time I was working with a marketing person on my Fit Advisor stuff, and we were talking about content, and she's like, "Have you ever considered writing a children's book?" And I was like, "What? Like, why would I do that?" And she's because so much of like your content and your passion is focused on your daughter and raising her to feel like she's in an inclusive environment, which is the opposite of what I felt growing up, where I felt a lot of that racism, exclusion, having to work really hard to be taken seriously as a South Asian woman. And I just try, like all of us, we're trying to do everything I can to kind of shield our children from that reality, which it's still there. Progress has been made, but there's always work that can be done. And so I started thinking more about that. And I was like, maybe I'll just explore it. Right. So when I started thinking about themes for the book, I wanted to write about something that was everyday that we do as South Asians, but that may be misinterpreted. Eating with our hands, so many cultures around the world do that, but there can be this perception that's unhygienic. So I was like, let's look into that. Like, what do we eat with our hands? And so I started doing research and I was like, wow, there's all these amazing reasons why we eat with our hands. And I'm like, it would be so wonderful to put that in a book because not only is it just something where like a South Asian child can read it and understand something more about their culture and their parents understanding more about the culture, but it's also a teaching moment, going back to education, right? Teaching people like, this is why we do it, which is why at the end of the book, I have an expanded note about why people eat with their hands, and it's for teachers, educators, parents who want to learn more because I just think that that's really important. And so it was a 2-year passion project. Very happy with the book and just the feedback that I have received over the years. I love doing book readings in which I had one that I did like towards the end of last year. And we were just talking about aspects of the book. And this little Indian 5-year-old girl is, I'm Indian and I read dosa too. And she was so excited to share aspects of the book because there isn't that many books in which Nyla, my daughter, is eating dosa. She's not eating mac and cheese or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was something where I wanted my daughter to have this gift, a book that she could see herself in, but I also just wanted to contribute to the lack of equity and inclusion in children's literature. So the best way I could do that is put a book out there myself. And so that's sort of the journey of why we eat with our hands has come out. I love that you found it in your local bookstore. Or people will tell me, they're like, "Oh, I was doing this and I saw your book." And it's because I'm a tired, busy mom. I don't have necessarily time to market and do all the
No, of
things.
course. Yep.
And for me, the book, I didn't want the book to feel like it was a business in which I had to grunt and hustle because felt like it would take the joy and passion out of it. So I put it out there. I do book readings when people reach out, but I don't actively market just because I'm like, it's out there. People hopefully will find it. I've had moms reach out to me who told me they cried just because they're like, I never had a book like this growing up. And I'm so happy that my child has this book. So things like that, I think is just, even if only 100 people ever bought the book, just the impact that I could make with the book for so many people out there is just really impactful for me and brings me a lot of joy. I'm also in my mid 40s. We in therapy, I learned that at this point in our careers, we're looking more at impact and what legacy we're going to leave versus monetary aspects of our career, right? Like money is important, but now we're really focused on like impact. Where can we do that the most and leave that legacy in this world?
Yeah. I think it has even deeper, more meaningful impact than because with this book and having it as a child and kind of taking care of the inner child that was never taken care of in this way, being validated. Like the girl who came to your reading, she and raises her hand and says, I'm Indian and I eat dosa too. The validation of that book, when you have all of these other voices in your life saying that's not civilized and all of these extremely racist stereotypes and racist things that come from colonization and imperialization and imperialism and that emphasize and encourage the disconnect with food. And here we eat with our hands in our culture and we are so connected to our food. You
Mhm.
taste better when you eat with your hands. And for European and Western influences to say, disconnect yourself from what is nurturing your body, it is so detrimental to our psyche and our health. And I think when you have a book that tells children who start their lives by eating with their hand, that's how they like our infants and newborns that are starting to, not newborns.
Toddlers.
Yes, yes. Beginning toddler stage of that's how they experience food, and that's what's
Mhm.
normal and natural, and to be settled to have been told that it's anything but natural is just wrong, and it's so harmful to us as kids, and it's in ways that I think we can't even process yet. So this book is more meaningful and has a deeper impact, I think, than you may know, and I just wanna thank you for choosing that topic as your children's book because it's so essential. It's like the fundamental to children is food and eating and nourishing yourself. And I just wrote a note that I have to send your book to one of my friends who
I
he has
appreciate
a
the
young so
support.
I'm gonna send it over to him. So Anjali, I wanna wrap this up by kind of going back to our original topic and then bringing in equity there. With Fit Advisors, your can you tell us a little bit about your typical clients and how you bring in the discussion of equity into the discussions with your clients? What it means to them?
Yeah, so many of my clients are people of color, even the ones who are not people of color. Everyone is, I would say, on the liberal side, more or less. So I don't even need to bring it up, especially kind of in the country we're living in today. It comes up almost in every client meeting because
Mm.
people are scared, people are worried, people are concerned. Do they need to leave this country? Can they stay? What impact is it having on them and their children? So, a lot of our conversations have deviated a bit from just the money to this kind of emotionally, what does it mean? And it's tough because I'm having all the same sentiments, but I also need to be kind of strong for them. And that's very, can be very emotionally draining for me because I'm also scared. I'm also worried. I am also sitting here wondering, what can I do to make a difference? What can we do as a community to make a difference? So it's something where I think because so many of my clients and I have shared values, a lot of these topics come up naturally, right? It comes up with my business owners who are Black, who are like, I can't get financing. You know how banks are. They're not going to give to Black
Mhm.
people. And I firsthand have seen that, right? So it constantly comes up. And the environment that I try to create is a safe space. So they can come to me and say that without having to micromanage what they're saying, which we're all used to doing, right? When we're in a space in which we're not the majority and we're a minority, we always have to manage what we're saying. We don't want to offend the other party. So part of it is just creating a safe space for them in which they can voice all of these concerns and then just figuring out together how we help move the needle on that. And we don't always do, but I work really hard to figure out other solutions. And so it's one of those things that, yeah, it's great it comes up. I wish it wasn't coming up so much. I think
Yeah.
it's just because of the environment that we're in today.
I think it's so helpful to have a financial advisor who's talking about something as vulnerable as money, who understands the racism and discriminatory history of money in this country, and then you having known and understanding that history can validate and then also advise on how to go about it. And that's something through your own lived experience and also, of course, understanding the lived experiences of others. It's just so valuable. It's a really valuable combination. And I'm so glad you can offer that. Anjali's website is fitadvisors.com. You can find lots of resources, information, and you can contact her through that website. And then her other website is ANJALIJARIWALA.com. Anjali, I want to thank you so much for being here. This has been such a great conversation, and I just really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you for having me, Pooja.
Thanks for joining us on Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. If today's conversation inspired you, keep the momentum going. Connect with us on LinkedIn at Boundless Awareness, subscribe to our YouTube at Boundless Awareness, and explore more free resources to support your anti oppression journey at boundlessawareness.com. Remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day with curiosity, compassion, and the courage to do a little better. I'm Puja Kotari, and I can't wait to keep learning and growing with you right here on Everyday Equity.